Alright guys, I haven't done a clinic in a while, so cut me some slack, but today we have around 30 minutes and I think the best thing I can do is break down a forehand and a backhand drive. Hopefully y'all can take away at least one thing to hopefully get you throwing more consistent and hopefully a little bit further. So who wants backhand first or forehand first?
Forehand.
All right, a lot of forehands. Okay. After I take a sip of water, we'll do that. All right. Perfect. Okay. So for a forehand, I believe the best thing to start with is grabbing the disc out of your bag and what grip you would use. The type of disc you use for a forehand is kind of really important when you're just starting off. I'd say for the average person, you should probably start off with something a little less stable and have it be a fairway driver. The first inclination for most people is to take a really overstable disc and kind of chop it over on an anhyzer. I'd recommend taking a more of a neutral flying disc. If you look at a flight chart, I'd probably say anything with about a 0 fade to about a 2 fade is a really great kind of learning tool. With Discmania, it's an FD2. With Innova, it's probably like a T-Bird, Prodigy, an F3, so on and so forth. So kind of your straight flying, neutral, maybe slightly overstable fairway driver is a really great disc to learn with. The reason why it's a better idea to learn with that disc over an overstable driver is the fact that you'll be able to throw more shots in the future with the forehand opposed to if you grab an overstable driver like an FD3 or a Splice. It'll help you work angles and just become a lot more efficient throwing a forehand, and it'll kind of expose you right off the bat saying, okay, I'm ripping it over and it's anhyzering. It'll teach you how to throw a cleaner release, which I'll tell you guys to the best of my knowledge on how to do. Just take note. I don't feel like I'm the best teacher in the world. What I can tell you guys is how I do something. Something that I found is like each and every pro out there has their own style. What works for them might not work for you. Like one of my best friends, Eric Oakley, I don't really recommend throwing the way he does because that only works for him. So you know, I can tell you some tidbits that help my game out and the way I think about it. But ultimately, you're going to have to kind of cultivate your own style at some point. So, next part is the grip, because we can't throw a forehand without grip. The grip that I use is a 2-finger stack grip. Essentially is, I start by putting the disc in the kind of webbing between my index finger and thumb, and I like to have it pretty much squeezed all the way up into that crevice. If I leave it with some slack, then I just feel like the disc is kind of wobbling around and I'm not really getting very good friction or stability in that throw. Next part is I'm putting my middle finger pressed up against the inner rim of the disc. I like to get it probably as flush and as flat as possible, putting pretty good amount of pressure. And then with the index finger, I'm pushing up against that. So that's where I'm getting kind of my pressure up against the rim, leaving my other 2 fingers kind of on this edge of the disc, kind of right along the edge of that. And basically, it's kind of like live long and prosper, but you're kind of pushing the middle finger into your ring finger and pinky finger, and it kind of creates like a little holster to kind of keep the disc nice and level. So that's basically my grip. And then the thumb, I'm not having it too far out to the middle, but I'm also not having it hanging out on the disc. You just kind of want it, if you were to take a clear disc, do I have one? Yeah, this kind of works. You see, it's kind of like in line with my pointer or my middle finger and my thumb. So it's kind of just creating a little bit of a pinch there. That allows me to get a comfortable feel in the hand. That allows me to get good pressure and good friction out of the hand. The 2 other grips that you can use that are kind of worth trying out are the power grip. It's basically the same thing, except you take your index finger and you kind of point it in on the rim. This gives you 2 contact points, which ultimately gives you more friction out of the hand. If you have problems maybe with a sluggish release, or you're not getting enough power, this could be something you try, or it just might be more comfortable for you. I used to do this, but now it actually really hurts my fingers. So I transitioned to a stacked grip that I just feel like it takes pressure off of my index finger and kind of disperses it a lot better. And then the other thing you can try, if you've heard of a fan grip for a backhand drive, this is kind of the fan grip of a forehand drive. You have your index finger out towards the middle of the disc or somewhere along the bottom, and that takes friction off, maybe allowing you to throw a little bit smoother. So there's grip. I'm going to kind of go from the hand to the wrist. One major thing of throwing a forehand is really making your body or your arm speed match how fast your wrist is snapping. What I mean by that, a lot of the time when I see someone who has a fluttery release, it means that they're not getting enough snap on their disc because it's kind of coming out with a wobble. Think of it like a whip. If you're not able to get that snap at the end, it's not going to make that crisp sound, and it's going to kind of fly out like a duck. So one thing that I like to do is make sure I have my wrist completely cocked back, and it's going to take a while for you to get a really clean wrist motion, but that's why you have practice. Perfect example is if I try to throw a forehand with my left hand, it looks terrible. I have all the knowledge in my head on how to make it possible, but there's no muscle memory. It takes time to develop. So wrist all the way cocked back, and for those of you starting out trying to develop a forehand, don't think you need this massive reach back on a forehand. Start off slow and take that mid-stable fairway driver and really just focus on giving a nice clean snap. Go out to a field, repeat that motion over and over again, really focusing on throwing it straight with maybe a little bit of a fade to the right if you're a right-handed player, opposed to bringing it all the way back and just really just chopping it over. So a shorter reach back is going to really help you get that initial release down, and then you'll notice when you throw a mid-range, a putter, you'll be able to control it a lot better and shape lines with your forehand shot. So I'll talk a little bit more about the reach back and such, but first I want to get into throwing position of the forehand and what to do with your lower body. With anything, I think it's good to break down your throw into specific movements because there's different steps in each throw. So for a forehand, it's great to start stand still as well as backhand. And this position you generally want to be in for throwing a forehand is you want your hips facing the target or your front knee facing the direction you want to go. And I kind of have weight on my back foot, and I really am focusing on loading as much energy and weight on my back foot as possible, because then I'm going to be able to push off my right leg into my lower body and then fire forward. And when I said I come back to my arm, I'm talking, you want to have at a certain point of the throw, you don't want, I don't know if you guys watch other videos, but a lot of people say keep the elbow tucked when you're throwing a forehand. That is true, but it's only for a brief moment of the throw. It's coming in, you're having it tucked, but then at the end of the throw, you want to open up, extend your arm out, and follow through. If you keep it tucked the entire time, it's just going to feel awkward, and you're not going to really be as athletic as you can be in your throw. Firing your weight forward. If you look at a pro that I really like to watch, and his forehand's amazing in my opinion, is Andrew Marweed. He really focuses on stomping his foot forward into his throw, and that's a good technique because it kind of signals to your brain that you need to release the throw. It's almost like he is taking like a hammer and hitting a nail into the wall with with a lot of force, and that ejects his disc out of his hand very quickly. So a good little drill you guys can do is just get into this throwing motion, weight loaded on the back foot about 90 degrees, and then having your front foot pointing towards the target, just kind of stomping forward and kind of like shaking hands with the basket. One crucial tip to make sure you don't roll your wrist over is throwing with the palm facing to the sky. If you throw your forehand shot and your palm is rolled over, that probably means you threw a roller or a really ugly shot. So keeping your palm facing up is crucial if you want to throw a forehand like Jeremy Colling or Ricky Wysocki, depending on if they're throwing a hyzer. So that's really crucial. That's kind of the basic points. I'm going to talk a little bit about a run-up because maybe some of you are a little bit more advanced in your forehand journey. A forehand run-up is like, there's a few different techniques you can use. You can, there's an X-step, there is a sexton hop, and kind of a little bit of shuffle. But essentially what it is you're going to start with your hips facing forward, and X-step is going to get your hips facing sideways from the target, and then the transition step, which is the sexton hop, it's the X and the X-step, is going to get your hips to fire from facing one direction, facing forward where the basket's going to be, and that's going to help you gain more distance and achieve different, more power levels. So, needs to go water. Water is good. So my forehand, basically, it's kind of like a hybrid between all three, I would say. It's kind of a little bit of a shuffle. I start with my left foot forward, go right, and then I kind of push my foot out into my throwing position. And what I'm doing here is I'm just turning, and that transition step allows me to put a lot of weight on my back foot and really drive through my lower body. And the similarities between a forehand and a backhand drive, it's so lower body centric. Your arm takes a lot of the force, but it's essentially like a rubber band. The rubber band itself doesn't have much to offer except the energy you put into it. And the energy for the forehand and the backhand is coming from your lower body, and you're just rotating on the lower half, and it's basically like a catapult, sending all your weight through your upper body and coming forward. So I really rely on my lower body for almost every shot. That's probably a reason why you think disc golfers, like, you've seen the guy who's super jacked and he can't throw that far. It doesn't have a lot to do with how much muscle you have. It's more about the fast twitch muscles, but also utilizing, the lower body. So I'll go over the forehand and then just talk about the follow through at the end. Grip, cocked back, really focus on the reach back not being too far. You can at some point, but if we're learning a forehand, keeping it short and snappy. Try standstill forehands first. There's a lot of times where I'll just be on the course and I'll do a standstill forehand. Weight on the back foot, driving through, keeping your elbow close at a point in the throw, but not the whole time. Pushing your weight forward and extending your arm out to your follow through, palm facing the sky. Okay, that's essentially it. And if you missed any of that, I have a clinic video on YouTube that I did teaching how I threw a forehand that you can kind of go frame by frame. It's easiest to basically watch your favorite pro, film yourself. There's so many slow-mo videos on YouTube. You can essentially just slow anything down on Jomez too, and just put you side by side, and you can kind of dissect it and see, okay, maybe Paul is doing this, Ricky's doing that, and I need to tweak my foot in this direction and I can throw more like him. Like, that's ultimately what's going to help you the most, and repetition, of course. Okay, backhand. And if I had to throw one shot, it'd definitely be backhand. It's a lot easier on your body because there's a lot less moving, or there's more moving parts, but that also takes the brunt off of certain joints. Because in nature, this is kind of like not a throw that you really throw that often. If you were hunting, you'd probably be throwing a spear, and that makes a lot more sense for us from a biological level. But backhand, all the joints are moving a lot more in a more natural way, I would say. A lot less torque on the lower body. Still a lot of the variables, and you definitely still can get hurt, but hopefully I can tell you the correct way to help you alleviate some pain and also gain some distance. Okay, so for the grip, there's quite a few different grips for a backhand, and with more fingers under the rim, that gives you, a lot more possibilities. The grip I use two main grips. Anything over a 9-speed, I'm pretty much throwing a power grip. That's all 4 fingers tucked underneath the rim with the thumb out on top. And I don't like to have my thumb too far out or too far in. It's pretty much right, probably like a ½ inch off where the rim meets the flight plate. And the pressure I'm using, I'm probably gripping it with about 60% of my overall strength. It's nothing like too crazy, but if someone tried to rip the disc out of my hand, it wouldn't be that, they couldn't do it. So a good grip is good. Next, the other grip I use is a fan grip, and that essentially is the same as my power grip. The only thing I'm doing is I'm taking the ring finger, pushing it out to the middle of the flight plate, and then the ring finger, I'm putting the pad of it out on the flight plate. What basically that does, takes off less friction and it slows down the disc. And you're not able to throw it quite as far, but some people who have grip locking issues or things along those lines, this is a really beneficial grip, especially for throwing mid-ranges and putters. Some people, I don't understand how people can throw a power grip on some putters. It just doesn't release well out of my hand. But a fan grip basically, opens up completely different shots in my bag, especially for the control aspect. Last thing I'll add to grip that I do sometimes, but not fully, but it might help you. Paul Uliberry, I watched a video and he said some stuff about this, is to find a really good grip is take your disc, put it on your forearm, and then just gradually roll it down and then close your fingers. And what you notice is the disc is in the center of your forearm, which means when you're doing your backhand throw, it's going to be a lot less likely that you, let's say, pull a shot in a weird direction. Because let's say if my grip is right there and you're bringing your arm across your body, it's not really in unison with the movement of your arm, and that could cause some unnecessary grip locks. So keeping the disc within the center of your arm can maybe help you achieve better angle control and consistency. So just throwing that out there. Okay, next I want to start from the ground up with the backhand. First thing I'll talk about is footwork and where your foot should be positioned when you throw. I'm going to mostly break down this position in the backhand throw because this is, my opinion, the most important part of the throw. This allows you to get all your power, but I will talk a little bit about X step. But the first thing is toe position. Usually when someone's trying to ask me to critique their throw and help them add distance, the first thing I see that's holding them back is the way they plant their foot. And this is kind of deep rooted in bad habits, and it takes a lot of focus, a lot of mindfulness when you're throwing to overcome this. And that is planting with your toe opening up to the target. So essentially, if you throw and your toe is facing forward for, let's say, a distance shot, It's a whole nother story when you're throwing an approach shot, because you're maybe in more opened up position, because you're able to throw maybe a little bit more accurately from short distance. But that's aside the point. We're talking about distance here. Think of your foot. You want to have your foot at least 90 degrees at the target. So if the target's facing that way, I'm generally planning with my heel facing the target. And a lot of amateurs and new players are planting with their toe opening up. And what that does is it gets rid of your whole lower body. And I was saying earlier that your lower body is a huge reason why you can, or top players can achieve distance. Without their lower body, then it's basically they're not throwing very far at all. So getting that 90-degree position on your foot allows you to use your lower body by locking out your hips. Whereas if you have your hips open, you're just kind of throwing all your weight forward and up high. You get the shot that goes straight up and falls forward. And I'm sure everyone here has done that at least once or twice. So by getting that foot at 90 degrees, locking everything out, allows you to drive your weight in a more linear motion across and through the target. And really think about driving your weight through the hip. So foot position is extremely key. So this essentially is the throwing position. This is, you'll see Ricky in it, you'll see Paul, Calvin. We're getting the lower body engaged, and that's very important. I'll talk a little bit about getting into that position, and that's with an X step. At this point, all players use an X step on tour, all players that are successful, because it's the best way to smoothly execute the steps prior to getting into the throwing position. So what an X step essentially means is you're going forward and you're stepping forward and then crossing your leg behind you to get an efficient transfer of power into that front foot. Probably most of you do this, but one thing I'd like to add is when doing an X step, don't focus so much on doing an exaggerated X step. So like, don't step too far forward and come straight back, because that's going to feel like you're doing weird choreography on the T-pad. You want to make sure that you're doing a quick, efficient X step that gets you into this position, but not this position. The reason I say that is, yeah, you might get more power if you're back here. Probably not. But if you're right here, you're going to get a lot more accuracy. And if you look at Kyle Klein or a lot of other players, we pretty much try to have our head towards the target as much as possible. So focusing on a quicker X step that's maybe right here opposed to right here is a better idea. And do as I say and not as I do, because I do a massive X step behind, but that's because I've been playing since I've been about 9 years old, and I can, move my body in a lot of different ways that some people can't, just purely by repetition. So my X step goes 1, 2, 3, 4. That's my lower body, and there's a lot of moving parts where I'll talk about my reach back a little bit, but just take note of this before I start talking about my upper body. I'm basically doing like these small moves with my upper body to tell myself I'm timing it so I get to the exact position I need to be in by the time I'm in the throwing position with my foot facing forward, locked out, so I'm getting maximum ability out of my hips. So my first step, I'm going 1, 2, kind of bring my disc forward, and then right now is I'm reaching back as my other leg is reaching forward, and this right here, when I am fully extended in one direction, I'm fully extended to the other, and that's basically a signal to my brain, okay, now it's time. I can fire off my back foot, drop the heel, and then start pulling my body through into the shot. So there's a lot of like weird timing, but one good thing to remember is at a certain point in your throw, you want to have your disc as far back as possible, fully extended, and your lower body fully extended, and that right there is going to be the point where you're maxed out. This is the position that the catapult is locked and ready to fire. With the reach back is kind of a misleading term. I think it's better to call it a reach out, because when you're reaching out away from your body and you're not getting in your own way. If you're reaching back, then you can kind of get some bad habits by curling your arm, and if you're curling your arm, that's going to throw everything off axis. You're going to, let's say I'm throwing a straight shot. If I'm curling here, we got a weird U shape that I'm going to pull through, and I'm probably going to swing out and grip lock this way. But if I want to throw a straight shot, then opposed to pulling back on a weird axis, I'm going to push my arm out and come through my body and release straight. So that's just taking out more variables by keeping the disc out away from you opposed to curling back. Then another thing that a lot of people do that I see, and it's really hard to kind of fix, is they swoop their arm. They kind of do an air bounce, and I feel like most people who do that know they're doing something wrong and can't really fix it. And what I have to say to that is, go out there, get in this throwing position where your foot is at least 90 degrees, and just focus on pulling your arm putting your arm out in front of you, not really reach back, but reached out, and then just taking it really slow, making sure you're coming straight across your chest and following through, keeping everything on a level plane, because if you start developing bad habits, it's going to be really hard to break out of them. It's going to be really hard to break out of them anyway, but you have to go out and consciously try to get rid of them, and that's going to take some time. Unfortunately, some might do it quicker than others, but trust me, there's hope for you if you focus with proper intent. Oh, water. Okay, with more reach back, there's one thing about that's crucial to learn, and it allows the top players to separate themselves from amateurs, and that's angle integrity. One thing that I see a lot that is kind of it kind of leaves people a little bit puzzled, is when they think they're throwing a hyzer, they have an overstable disc or like a Firebird, and they throw it and like they tell their buddies, man, I can't throw Firebirds, they're too flippy for me, when actually they're not. You're just throwing a bad form. You're pulling back with the intention to throw a hyzer. You have a hyzer in your mind, you know you're going to throw a hyzer, and then at the last second you pull your arm over, you throw your weight up, and it's not a very streamlined or fluid motion. You essentially stand up and you pull your arm back, and that's really what a shank is, or a grip lock. Whereas if you want to throw a hyzer anytime, I mean, I could make a really understable disc look overstable just by the angle I put it on, and that's where angle integrity comes in. Notice if I'm throwing a spike hyzer, I'm lining up and I'm loading my body and coming down from low to high, and if I want to keep it on that angle, I'm bringing my arm through the same, let's say, imagine a hula hoop around my body. If I bend over, the hula hoop is going to raise up in the back and lower down in the front, and my arm should follow the same axis as the hula hoop the entire time, and that goes the same for throwing a flat shot. If I want to throw a flat shot, I should reach back straight and then follow through straight in every angle in between. Anheuser or a roller, you're gonna lean back, hula hoop's gonna come up, backside's gonna go down. I'm gonna follow like that to keep the angle integrity. And last thing on the backhand is follow through. Follow through is crucial for keeping our bodies feeling good, but also keeping shots flying far. If you short yourself on the follow through, then you might not get as much potential out of your drive as if you follow through. So it's a cheesy saying, go through it, not throw through your shot. So even when you think you're done throwing, pretend you're not done once you release the shot. Follow through by keeping, or one really good thing to do as someone who's learning a proper follow through is think about your chin on your right shoulder, pulling through your shot, and then a proper follow through is when you finish on your left shoulder. A lot of you probably see a picture, and this is a very common picture, is when you throw a shot and then you see whoever you're watching finish their shot with their arm like this. That's good because you've thrown all your weight forward, you've allowed your body to come forward and decelerate on the shot, and you didn't leave any power on the table because you came through, you still had power, and the energy brought you to this position. So, to briefly summarize the backhand, grip, it's kind of dealer's choice in a lot of regards. I think grip is a little overrated. I showed you the two grips that I really like to use. Some people's hands are a lot bigger. They might throw a 3-finger, they might even throw a 2-finger grip. It's kind of, figure it out yourself. I just probably say, make sure your thumb is on a good portion of the disc. If it's falling off, then you're probably losing grip and it's, you're kind of cheating yourself. One thing I forgot to mention. I don't think it's a good idea to cock your wrist. You're not really getting any extra snap or spin. So many people think that you're just spinning the disc out of your hand. It's going to spin naturally if you follow the right technique. So keep the wrist straight. Footwork. Go to the field. Get in this position. Right butt cheek or heel facing the target, and make sure you're just reaching back and firing through your lower body. That's one of the peskiest things, is when you're firing forward, your hips are facing forward, and you're just not going to be getting as much distance as you could. X step, focus on a quick, efficient X step, not crossing the back leg over too far, and just making it comfortable. Take it slow, one step at a time. It's going to really benefit your game. Reach out, not back. Try not to curl, push out straight forward, and then cross your body as smooth as possible. Film yourself, and just be very conscious when you're learning. If you have problems rounding or curling in your arm, really just go as slow as you need to. Get a tripod like that, get a thing for your phone to hold it up, and just really dedicate yourself to the process of learning a clean reach back, because it'll open up so many different avenues in terms of throwing new shots, smoother shots. You'll like yourself for it. And angle integrity, think of the hula hoop metaphor. If you want to throw a hyzer, dip down and follow through on that same axis, and also follow through. Chin on one shoulder with the chin on the other, rotating on the ground. All right, I'm ready to play some disc golf. All right, thanks guys, I really appreciate it.